Let's start with what you're buying. The cruise industry has roughly 4 asset tiers, each representing a completely different business you're attempting to enter. At the bottom of the market, and the place most first-timers mistakenly think is cheap, you're looking at a used expedition or river cruise vessel carrying 50 to 150 passengers. These ships come to market through bankruptcy sales, fleet reductions, and end-of-life transitions. You can pick up a 1990s-era expedition vessel at auction for $3 to $10 million. The hulls are often sound. The interiors are not. The safety systems are frequently not compliant with current SOLAS standards. That's the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, the principal international treaty governing what your ship is required to have before it carries a single human being. A realistic refit to bring a distressed expedition vessel up to current standards adds $500, zeroes into $2 million on top of the purchase price. Here's the thing about refit estimates in this industry. Operators consistently underestimate them by a factor of 3 to 5. A ship that looks fine above the waterline can require $2 to $5 million in structural work, safety systems, and navigation upgrades once you pull it apart. It looks like a bargain right up until the first marine surveyor's report comes back. Total realistic entry for Tier 1, $3 to $12 million. Before you've hired a crew, purchased fuel, or spent a single dollar on marketing. The second tier is a proper small ocean-going passenger ship, 150 to 600 passengers, a real itinerary structure, proper dining, and full cabin inventory. This is the segment that luxury boutique lines like Windstar operate in. Ships in this category trade between $30 million and $80 million secondhand, depending on age and condition. New construction for this size of vessel runs $150 million to $400 million. For context on secondhand pricing at the distressed end, when Windstar Cruises went through bankruptcy in 2011 and was sold at auction, Anschutz Corporation acquired the entire line, ships included, for $39 million. That is the floor on what distressed assets in this tier actually clear at when the lenders want out fast. Tier 3 is the mid-market ocean cruise ship, 600 to 2,000 passengers, the kind of vessel that competes with Carnival's legacy fleet. A 20-year-old ship at this scale trades at $20 to $50 million, but requires $50 million or more in refurbishment to compete on passenger experience. The capital required to operate a vessel of this class, fuel, port fees, crew, food, insurance, runs approximately $1 million per day in operating expenses. Tier 4 is where the math becomes difficult to comprehend. When Royal Caribbean contracted the Star of the Seas, delivered in 2025, the build cost was $1.88 billion. The Utopia of the Seas, launched in 2024, came in at $1.4 billion and carries 7,000 passengers. These are not ships. They are cities, floating on a hull, financed like infrastructure projects, and depreciated over decades. You are not buying Tier 4. Let's establish that right now and move on. So you've found a ship, you've done a survey, adjusted your budget upward by 30% because the marine surveyor found things, and you've wired the funds. You now own a vessel. You do not yet own a business. Here's the paperwork standing between you and your first passenger. Your ship needs to fly a flag. No ship in the world operates without a flag state registration, which determines whose laws govern your vessel's construction standards, crew requirements, and labor practices. The Bahamas is the most common flag for cruise ships globally. More than 200 cruise ships are registered there. Panama is third. Both have ratified SOLAS and MARPOL, the Environmental Compliance Treaty, while imposing fewer domestic requirements than operating under a U.S. flag would. Under a U.S. flag, you must hire American citizens. Under a Bahamas flag, you hire globally. This is not a loophole. This is the entire structural premise of how cruise line economics function. Carnival Corporation is incorporated in Panama. Royal Caribbean is incorporated in Liberia and flies Bahamas and Malta flags. Norwegian is incorporated in and flies the flag of the Bahamas All three reference Section 883 of the Internal Revenue Code in their financial filings, a provision exempting foreign incorporated companies from U.S. federal tax on income from international ship operations, provided their home country grants a reciprocal exemption. The arrangement is entirely legal and has been since the 1980s. You should structure your entity the same way. An American-flagged cruise line paying American wages and American corporate taxes competing with Carnival is not a business. It is a charity. On top of flag registration, you need SOLAS certification from the flag state. The inspection process for a new-to-you used vessel runs 3 to 12 months depending on condition. You need a crew with International Maritime Organization certified licenses for every position from captain down to lifeboat operator. If you're operating anywhere near U.S. waters, you need a U.S. Coast Guard certificate of inspection, which adds 2 to 4 months to the timeline. If you want to sell cruises to the public in the United States, you need a Federal Maritime Commission performance bond. The FMC requires you to demonstrate financial ability to reimburse passengers if you cancel sailings. The bond amount scales with the value of advance ticket sales you hold. The moment you start selling cabins for future voyages, which is the moment your business starts generating cash, the FMC is watching, because advance deposits are a form of debt, and passenger protection is the reason the FMC exists. Total timeline from vessel acquisition to first paying passenger, 9 to 18 months in the optimistic case. Legal and compliance costs alone run from several $100,000 to multiple millions of dollars. This is before you've lost a single sailing day to unexpected repair, which you will. There is a faster path. Instead of acquiring a vessel and building from scratch, you buy an existing cruise operation, complete with flag registration, Coast Guard certification, FMC bond, crew contracts, and an existing booking calendar. You skip a year of regulatory overhead and step directly into an operational structure. This is what A&K Travel did in 2023 when Crystal Cruises collapsed. A&K, a well-capitalized travel group, acquired the Crystal brand and 2 ships out of bankruptcy, inheriting an operational platform rather than constructing one. The transaction was private. The exact price was not disclosed, but acquiring 2 ocean vessels with a recognized brand, a customer database, and full compliance infrastructure at a bankruptcy sale price represents a category of deal that cannot be replicated through ground-up development. In January 2025, Ambassador Cruise Line and French operator Compagnie Française de Croisière announced a merger. 2 small players consolidating infrastructure, itineraries, and compliance frameworks rather than each bearing the fixed overhead independently. The calculus is straightforward. Every month you spend navigating flag registration, SOLAS certification, and FMC bond posting is a month your ship is not generating revenue. Buying an operating business, even a distressed one, buys you time. Time is the thing the regulatory timeline destroys most efficiently. Here's how a cruise line actually makes money. And it's not what you think. Think of a cruise ship as a shopping mall that moves and charges admission at the door. The ticket is the admission fee. It covers your berth and your basic meals, and cruise lines have spent 4 decades training passengers to view it as the primary purchase. But the ticket is not where the margin lives. The ship has a casino, bars, specialty restaurants charging $40 a head on top of a ticket that already includes food, shore excursions where the line books as intermediary and takes a cut, spa services, Wi-Fi packages, photo packages, the onboard art auction, which is its own bizarre category of persistent ancillary revenue, premium beverage packages, reserved seating, cabin upgrades. And behind all of it, a ship that is designed architecturally, spatially, operationally to keep you spending from the moment you board until the gangway goes down. In 2023, the average cruise passenger generated $20,102 in total revenue. Roughly $1,060 came from the base ticket. Roughly $650 or so came from spending while on board. The remaining portion from other fees and adjustments. Onboard spending represents 31% of revenue, but it represents the majority of profit because the ticket is priced to fill the ship, and a full ship with 1,200 board people is a revenue machine at the bar. For Royal Caribbean in recent years, the net profit per passenger cleared approximately $452. On a ship carrying 4,000 passengers, that's $1.8 million in net profit per sailing. The major cruise lines routinely operate at 105% to 110% occupancy, a statistic that seems impossible until you understand that cruise berths are sold as lower berths, and the third and fourth passengers who share a cabin pay heavily discounted or nearly free fares, specifically because their contribution to bar revenue, casino revenue, and shore excursion margin covers and exceeds the discounted ticket. A passenger who books the cheapest interior cabin and spends 4 days drinking, gambling, and booking excursions at $80 each generates more money than a passenger who pays full fare and stays in their cabin. The global cruise industry generated approximately $71 billion in revenue in 2024. Market projections put the figure at roughly $94 billion by 2026, at a compound annual growth rate of around 4.8%. That is not a niche. It is a global hospitality category roughly the size of the entire global hotel industry at peak summer. In January 2022, Genting Hong Kong, a company controlled by Malaysian billionaire Lim Kok Thay, filed for liquidation in Bermuda. The background is worth understanding in detail, because it is the most technically instructive cruise industry collapse on record. Genting Hong Kong was, for a decade, one of the most ambitious expansion stories in global cruising. It owned Crystal Cruises, a luxury brand with a devoted following in the premium segment. It owned Star Cruises, focused on Asian markets. And it owned MV Werften, a group of 3 German shipyards it had acquired in 2016, specifically to build its next-generation fleet, including a massive new vessel called Global Dream, designed to be one of the largest cruise ships ever constructed. The strategy was vertical integration. Own the shipyards that build your ships. Control the supply chain. It looked visionary in 2016. Then COVID-19 halted the cruise industry globally in March 2020. No passengers meant no revenue. Ships don't stop costing money when they stop sailing. Debt doesn't stop accruing when your ships are anchored. By mid-2020, Genting Hong Kong had reported a net loss of $1.7 billion. By July 2020, the company had suspended all payments to creditors to preserve liquidity. The German government, which had provided significant support to keep MV Werften's construction workforce employed, eventually reached the limit of what it was willing to commit. When negotiations for additional financing broke down in January 2022, MV Werften filed for insolvency. That filing triggered cross defaults on up to $2.8 billion in financial arrangements, the debt structure that Genting Hong Kong had used to fund its expansion. Genting filed for liquidation on January 19, 2022. Lim Kok Thay stepped down as chairman and CEO 2 days later. What happened to Crystal Cruises in the specific hours around that filing is worth stating plainly. The Crystal Symphony, which was supposed to be sailing to Miami, diverted to the Bahamas to avoid potential seizure by creditors in a U.S. port. A fuel supplier had filed a lawsuit seeking $4.6 million in unpaid fuel bills going back to 2017. When a creditor files a maritime lien against a vessel, the ship can be seized in any port that recognizes international admiralty law. The Bahamas provided temporary refuge. Passengers aboard the diverted ship eventually disembarked in Nassau. The trail left behind approximately $100 million in passenger advance deposits, future booking payments, and unpaid travel agent commissions. No criminal charges. No prison sentences. A Bermuda liquidation process. Lim Kok Thay retained his broader Genting Group holdings and was not personally implicated in misconduct. A&K Travel acquired the Crystal brand and 2 ships in 2023. Crystal Cruises relaunched under new ownership. What should stay with you about this case is not that Lim Kok Thay was reckless or fraudulent. What should stay with you is that a luxury cruise business with $2.8 billion in debt had zero margin when revenue stopped. not thin margins. 0. The debt structure that was serviceable during expansion became terminal the moment 2 consecutive years produced no operating revenue. Every dollar Genting borrowed to build Global Dream and acquire MV Werften became a dollar with nowhere to hide when the ship stopped sailing. The second case involves a different category of failure, not a balance sheet, but a bridge. On January 13, 2012, the Costa Concordia, a 114,000-ton vessel carrying 4,252 passengers and crew, operated by Costa Crociere, a Carnival Corporation subsidiary, struck an underwater rock off the Tuscan island of Giglio, Italy. The ship capsized. 32 people died. The captain, Francesco Schettino, had deviated from the ship's approved voyage plan to perform an unofficial nautical salute, a close-pass maneuver near the island that was a tradition among captains in the region, unauthorized by Costa Crociere and not filed with the ship's routing. When the ship struck the rock and the evacuation began, Schettino was recorded by the Italian Coast Guard as having already left the vessel while hundreds of passengers were still aboard. The Coast Guard commander's instruction to him, "Get back on board, damn it," was played on international television. Schettino did not comply. In 2015, Schettino was sentenced to 16 years in prison, 10 years for multiple counts of manslaughter, 5 years for causing a maritime disaster, and 1 year for abandoning passengers. He began serving his sentence in 2017 after exhausting his appeals. For Carnival Corporation, the total financial cost of the Costa Concordia was approximately $2 billion. The salvage operation alone, rotating the 952-foot ship upright from where it lay on its side, floating it and towing it to a port for dismantling, cost approximately $1.2 billion, making it the largest maritime salvage operation in history. Passenger settlements, regulatory costs, and liability payments added hundreds of millions more. Carnival and Costa Crociere settled potential criminal liability by paying a fine of approximately 1 million euros. The company's stock fell 18% in the days following the disaster. The original Costa Concordia cost $570 million to build in 2006. The cost of destroying it and cleaning up the consequences of its loss exceeded the build cost by a factor of 3.5. This failure mode has nothing to do with COVID-19, financing structures, or cross-default provisions. It has to do with a human being on a bridge making an unofficial navigational decision that took roughly 13 seconds to execute. You can flag your ship in the Bahamas, structure your corporate entity in Panama, optimize your onboard revenue mix, and fill every cabin to 108% occupancy. And one decision by one captain in the dark can cost you $2 billion and put someone in prison. Your liability exposure is not theoretical. It is physical, constant, and directly proportional to every passenger standing on your deck. 2 case studies. 4 rules. 1. Your debt structure must survive the worst case, not the base case. Genting Hong Kong modeled expansion on the assumption that ships would keep sailing. They did not keep sailing. A cruise business that cannot service its debt when revenue stops for 6 months is not a viable business. It is a viable business as long as nothing goes wrong. 2. The flag matters, but the captain matters more. You can register your ship in the most favorable jurisdiction in the world, comply with every SOLAS standard, pass every inspection, and a human being on the bridge can make a decision in the dark that costs more than the ship was worth to build. Operational quality is not a soft metric. It is a direct economic variable. 3. Advanced deposits are borrowed money. Every dollar in your booking calendar is a liability, not an asset. Passengers pay months or years ahead of sailing. They are effectively lending you money at 0 interest. When the ship doesn't sail, you owe them all of it immediately with no ship to sell to cover it. The FMC bond exists precisely because this failure mode is predictable and recurring throughout the industry's history. 4. Never let a vendor go unpaid long enough to file a maritime lien. A maritime lien attaches to the vessel itself, not the operating company. It can be enforced in essentially any commercial port in the world. A ship under a maritime lien is a ship that can be seized at any port call, with passengers still aboard, with no notice to your booking calendar. Crystal Symphony ran to the Bahamas specifically to avoid this. It bought days, not escape. The single biggest structural threat to this business model is not a pandemic, though a pandemic will kill you fastest. The structural threat is concentration. As of 2024, 3 corporate groups, Carnival Corporation, Royal Caribbean Group, and Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings, control the overwhelming majority of global ocean cruise capacity. The rest of the industry operates in gaps they leave: luxury niches, expedition segments, river cruising. If you're entering this industry, you're entering a market that is oligopolistic at the mass market level. The big 3 can discount you into unprofitability on any route you attempt to serve, because their cost per passenger at scale is simply lower than yours. Their marketing budget is larger. Their loyalty programs are stickier. Their ships are newer. The global cruise market is heading toward $94 billion by 2026, at roughly 4.8% annual growth. That growth is real. But it is being captured almost entirely by fleets that were built and financed at a scale you cannot replicate as a new entrant. What's left is the niche: expedition cruising to Antarctica or the Norwegian fjords, boutique Mediterranean routes with 200 passenger ships that compete on intimacy rather than price, river cruising in Europe or Southeast Asia. These are real businesses with real margins. They are also the first casualties in a recession. A passenger who is budget conscious will book a Carnival cruise for $700 before they book your boutique cruise for $48. The forward pressure is carbon. The International Maritime Organization's pathway to net zero shipping emissions by 2050 requires fuel technology transition across every vessel in the global fleet. LNG, methanol, and ammonia propulsion are all under active development by the major lines. For small operators with older vessels, compliance is not a line item. It is a fleet replacement question. A 1995 expedition ship that cost you $6 million cannot be made IMO compliant for a number that makes economic sense. The regulatory trajectory is clear. The capital cost is potentially terminal for undercapitalized operators. Time to pull it all together and answer the actual question: how much money do you actually make if you do this right? Scenario 1, the small expedition operator. You spend $8 million on a used vessel, $1.5 million on a SOLAS refit, $600,000 on regulatory compliance and first-year crew contracts, and $400,000 on a website, distribution partnerships, and initial marketing. Call it $10.5 million total before the first sailing. Your ship carries 80 passengers. You charge $3,500 per berth for a 10-day expedition. At 20 voyages per year, 85% occupancy, 68 passengers per sailing, annual ticket revenue is $4.76 million. Add onboard revenue at roughly 30% on top of that, and you're at $6.2 million in total annual gross. Operating costs, fuel, crew wages, port fees, food, insurance, ongoing maintenance run approximately $4 million per year for a vessel this size. Net operating income, roughly $2.2 million per year. Payback on your $10.5 million investment. Approximately 5 years before you've set aside capital for the engine overhaul that every aging expedition vessel will eventually require. This is a real business. It is not a machine that prints money. If you miss 2 or 3 sailings per year for mechanical issues, weather, or crew certification problems, your margin narrows to a level where one bad season produces a loss. The expedition cruise segment grew rapidly from 2016 to 2019. Operators who entered with underfinanced vessels have largely been absorbed by better capitalized lines or gone dark. Scenario 2, the mid-market acquisition. You identify a distressed mid-sized cruise line, 800 passengers, 2 ships, an established brand, and acquire it out of bankruptcy for $60 million, including vessels, brand, FMC certification, and operational infrastructure. You spend $30 million on refurbishment to bring the product up to current competitive standards, running the ships at 90% occupancy, charging an average of $1, $400 per passenger on 7-day sailings. Annual gross revenue across both ships comes to approximately $130 million. Operating costs at a realistic 87% of revenue for a business you're still restructuring, roughly $113 million. Net operating income, approximately $17 million per year. On $90 million in total invested capital, that's a roughly 5-year payback if nothing goes catastrophically wrong in the interim. The risk in scenario 2 is not the operating math. The operating math is fine. The risk is the debt you use to finance the acquisition, and what happens to your ability to service it if a storm keeps your ships in port for a week, a norovirus outbreak generates 4 days of front-page headlines, or a geopolitical event closes a key itinerary market for a season. The math works until it doesn't. In this industry, until it doesn't, arrives faster and more completely than in almost any other business you could name. You came in thinking a cruise ship was a floating hotel with a better view. What you've got is a floating hotel with a maritime lien exposure, a SOLAS inspection schedule, a Federal Maritime Commission performance bond, a flag state registration in a country you will never visit, crew sleeping 8 to a cabin you'll never see, a debt structure that requires the ocean to stay open, the passengers to stay solvent, and the world to keep sailing for 5 consecutive years before your capital is returned, and a captain on a bridge making decisions you will never be present for in the dark in international waters on your behalf. None of that is a reason not to do it. Some of the most durable and profitable businesses in the history of the hospitality industry have exactly this risk profile. You just need to know which risks you're accepting before you wire the funds. If you want to understand more structures like this, the ones where the deal looks clean until you actually look, subscribe. New episode every week.